Get ready for the world's greatest Arsenal podcast. Welcome to another podcast by Guns and Yellow Ribbons. Enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to Guns and Yellow Ribbons. My name is Fergus. I am your host. You are watching Guns and Yellow Ribbons, the Arsenal history series that we've done this summer. We're on episode 7. Didn't realise there was as many. And we're at 1986 to 2018, the Wenger Era. It will be probably very current for many of you. You'll all remember it. We all got our different views, which you'll see. This is a huge era in our lifetime of our football club. We moved stadiums again and much more. We were quite successful as well. Mark, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take off those little names at the bottom so we can see our t-shirts better. Mark, yeah, we got different views, I think. Mark, how are you doing, mate?
Sweet as a nut, mate. Sweet as a nut.
Sweet as a nut. Good.
Very good. Oops.
Andy, welcome back again. As you said on Friday, it's becoming a habit.
Yep, it certainly is. Nice to see you again. My wife thinks I'm having an affair with you lot.
Well, we want to ask about Trev's wife because, she's busy feeding the chickens and stuff like that. Trev, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you, Fergus. Really good indeed. I'll explain this during the course of the podcast, but I sort of agree with both of your t-shirts, you and Mark, because my thoughts were that Wenger should have gone, but I didn't want to get too loud and be horrible to him because I appreciated what he'd done before that. So yeah, I sort of sat right down the middle, and we're going to talk about it, mate. So yeah, let's get on.
We are indeed. And for people listening to the audio, I have the t-shirt from the final day of the season, which was Mercy Arson, and Mark, who clearly said to us on the roundup one before we started this series that he was a very early Arsenal out one. And this isn't going to be an AKB versus WOB sort of podcast. It's going to be a history podcast. But Mark, you do have something that's very unique to yourself. And Andy, I believe, has one as well. You've got the final program, but your program is slightly more different than everybody else's. So you've got the picture of Wenger walking down the tunnel on the final day, but yours and Andy, because what you've done with the club and as historians and authors, have got your name on the bottom of them. Yeah, I can sell mine. You can't sell yours.
Oh, you can. I'm jealous. It don't matter what your name is because they're very limited edition and they'll be sought after anyway. Fergus, I've got to pull you up because you've done it twice now, son. Wenger's the game you're talking about wasn't the last game of the season. It was Wenger's last game at the Emirates Stadium. His actual last game was away at Huddersfield. So yeah, just put it out there, yeah.
Page 3 of the notes, mate. Page 3 of the notes.
Okay, all right then. Just so you know.
Yeah, just
to let you know, that program with a name on it fetches quite a lot on eBay.
Oh, does it?
I haven't sold mine, by the way. I would show you mine, but I can't find it. I've put it somewhere safe.
Mark's going to be back in about 20 minutes. He just needs to do a listing quite quickly.
That's something you boys should be very proud of, by the way, having that program with names on. I'm very jealous, if I'm honest. I don't get jealous very often, but I'm very jealous of the fact that the club showed your appreciation like that. And
it was very nice. And we were proud to write for the program when we, 3 or 4 years that we did. Hopefully we'll be back doing stuff, but you never know, do you?
No. If you start being a nice person again, Mark, you might do.
No chance, mate.
So listen, after a short tenure of Stuart Houston and Bruce Rioch, who, as we talked about on the end of the last podcast, brought Bergkamp to Arsenal, was followed by that was after George Graham's departure. Arsenal went out probably under the instruction, or definitely under the instruction of David Dein, and found this unknown Frenchman who had been won the league in 1988 with Monaco. He played for a period in football until he was about in the early 80s, late 70s, to no real standard. And then he went out and won the league in Japan with, is it Nagayo Grampus 8? Grampus 8 is all I know them as.
8, yeah.
And they won the Emperor Cup and the Japanese Super League in his first and only year out there. The headlines were us and who. Mark, since you have this opposing T-shirt, and that's the only time we'll refer to it going on. I'll go with you first of all. Why, what was your views of this man historically, not necessarily your personal views, but historically, what was the views that you had, and historically, how will he go down in history, this appointment?
What do you mean, the views at the time that I had, or?
Yeah, well, at the time, probably first and foremost, yeah.
Well, at the time, I didn't really think anything of it, really. You just thought, well, he might be good, he might be bad. You don't know, do you? As I said, no one really knew who he was. You just trust whoever's making the decisions that they made the right decision. And obviously, for the first 10 or so years, they did. Well, 6 years, 8 years, they did.
Yeah.
Okay.
How he'll be seen in history, you don't know, do you? You really,
no. And we talked about that before we cut.
It's like you said. It's difficult to say. It might be that in the 30 years, no one will have been invincible. In which case, being invincible will be elevated to a very high achievement. Maybe 2 or 3 clubs might do it in that period, and in the next case it won't be. So it's difficult to say, because that's his real achievement. His real achievement was the Invincibles.
Well,
and
Invincible and 49 games
FA Cup record as well.
And 49 games unbeaten. If it wasn't for Rooney, it would have gone further. Trevor, you're wearing a shirt. Since we're talking about shirts, you're wearing a shirt. That was the last shirt we wore at Highbury. It's a red currant shirt. We will be doing a question at some point throughout this podcast. And at the end, when we come to Andy can explain what the prize will be. So just keep on listening throughout. Trev, what was your thoughts as a failing old man back then in 1996 of this appointment of a much younger manager than you were?
He's relentless, isn't he, boys? He's absolutely relentless, this Fergus bloke. He won't remember him, but if it was a record player, I'd be punching him because the needle would be stuck. You know what I mean? But anyway, much the same as Mark. It was properly a case of Arsene who. Nobody heard of him. Nobody knew of him. You looked at him, and with the greatest respect to Arsene Wenger, I'm not labelling him here, but you did look at him and think he's a strange-looking fella. He didn't look like a football man, did he? Well, they called him the professor, didn't they? He didn't look like a football man. So yeah, he came in, and none of us knew. But I can't remember him getting any stick about being at the Arsenal in the early days. He took over. We hadn't seen much success for a few years because Graham's team was on the decline, and then Rioch came in, and I think Rioch steered us to 5th in one season, didn't he? And then Rioch went, and Stuart Houston was told he weren't going to keep the job, so he went, and Pat Rice took over, and then this bloke Wenger turns up. Yeah, and we just didn't know, did we? We just didn't have a clue. But what he did do was one of his first signings was Patrick Vieira, wasn't it? Hey, and it was here we go. One of, I said, one of.
Well, if you look at the timing, did he actually sign him, or was it a Bruce Rioch signing? Because the day that Vieira signed was the day that Rioch was sacked.
So Vieira was signed in September 96.
No. He signed in August. He signed on the same day that Rioch was sacked.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm giving him a Wenger because they'd obviously been tapping Wenger up, and Wenger had said, "Go and get Vieira and go and get Remy Gard."
Or maybe Trev.
Say that.
Trev, you should actually maybe Trev, you should credit David Dean with that signing, because David Dean signed Wenger, and David Dean would have was influential on lots of signings there afterwards, including Vieira.
Well, I'm going to say to him, I'm going to keep it in my head because it makes me smile that it was the start of Vieira was the start of a massive French influence for a while at Arsenal Football Club, and I'm going to time that nicely with Wenger coming in. And I don't care because Andy is probably right, but I don't care. I'm going to.
Yeah,
let me just read the Daily Mirror on the 10th of August, 1996. This is 2 days before Rioch was sacked, so he was still Arsenal manager. Right? It says Arsenal were preparing a £4.5 million swoop for AC Milan star Patrick Vieira. The French under-21 star was set to join Ajax this summer, but the deal fell through because personal terms could not be agreed. Now, Bruce Rioch's Gunners are planning to snatch midfielder Vieira. So, 2 days before Rioch was sacked, and there's the Daily Mirror talking about Arsenal signing him.
Yeah,
no one knows that Rioch's going to be sacked, except that, of course, the management knew that he was going.
Of course they did. So, I don't know. Who knows? But I would think that Wenger then would have been speaking to Dean and said, "Yeah, I'll come. I've got to work my period out at Grand Passat, but I'll come. But I want this bloke Vieira. I want him." And
admittedly, Vieira did say when he signed that he only joined because he knew that Wenger was coming. So on the day that on the day that Rioch was sacked, Vieira knew that Wenger was going to become manager. And he kept it quiet.
So 6-1.
Andy,
yeah.
Andy, he Wenger used like existing players like Merson, Adams, and Parler, who all had demons in their lives. They all had issues and problems. I don't know what year it was at Tony Adams. I can't remember what year Tony Adams went away in a Lizzie's hotel. But, they all had issues with drink, drugs and gambling. And Wenger took these very aging players who were probably in the final days of their career and gave them probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years with the change in diet and a more holistic approach. What was your thoughts on that?
Well, those sort of players, the press has been talking for 2 or 3 years about those players, be it getting on, the likes of Dixon and Winterburn. Adams was 30 by then. So the whole of the defence, the press had been saying for a couple of years, Graham and then Rioch, they've got to sort them out. They've got to get replacements. But as you say, that Wenger has brought in this new dietary regime and training regime. And those players, as you say, they had another 5, 6 years left in them, and they were probably their better years because, certainly for them personally, because their wages started to rocket at that time. That's when the Premier League started to really take off, and the money started flowing in. So they probably earned more money in those last 5 years than they had in the previous 15 years. And of course, as we'll go on to talk about, they enjoyed a great period of success as well. So they won quite a few more trophies. And if you speak to any of them players, they will all say that it was all down to Arsene Wenger and what he did, what he brought to the club.
No, totally. You could listen to Ray Parler daily on Talk Sport, and he says that his career was extended by 5 to 10 years purely by Wenger, and others have said the same. Mark, I've forgotten my train of thought. Mark finishing third in his debut season, and to win the league the following season. He's the first manager from outside the UK. He didn't have really a huge footballing career. What did you make of? Because we met. That's it. You mentioned beforehand that he built, and people talk about that. He went into his career with Arsenal with a huge and really strong back 4-5. Do you think that was what helped him to get to that third and winning the league the following season?
Well, yeah, because he did, because he blended, and this is, it was a good move by him. He blended what he had with what he thought he needed to go forward. To basically he changed the forward line pretty completely at midfield, but kept the defence in line. So he saw what was needed. I mean, if you look at it, also if you look at his career, really, he didn't really ever pick up, other side from Campbell, I think, he didn't really pick up and understand defence, I don't think, as much as he did attack. So it was good for him because he already had a ready-made defence, could sit there, bosh, and then he could change what he knew, which was obviously midfield and going forward.
Yeah.
I've had that. One second, Trev. I've had that said before that he never really signed any good defenders. He did sign Loren. He did sign Colatora. So do you not think that he did pick out a few?
Yeah, okay, but he didn't. He did. To my mind, he ignored the defence to the expense of the attack all through his career.
Possibly, I'd have to agree with you. Trev, go on.
No, it's really interesting listening to you to talk there because you was on my chain of thought in that there's so many times when you can talk about Wenger and you can make a contradiction, but it applies both ways. Absolutely, Wenger inherited a defence that was worthy of winning the league, and it showed that he just did a bit of work with them. But he inherited that, and then you think that towards the end of his career, when we were all fed up with what was happening at the Arsenal Football Club, he couldn't build a team, let alone a defence. But then you take a backward step to what Fergus just said, and he built an invincible defence in 2004. So you can contradict yourself lots about Wenger. You can look at the man; he was there. I think the thing was he was there that long. Yeah. That there's so much time that for him to contradict himself. And we mentioned him, so we've got to talk about it. Kolo Touré was one of Wenger's greatest signings, in my view. I remember watching him play in his first few games for the Arsenal. And it didn't matter where Wenger played him. He just ran around the pitch. Like, when you see 7-year-olds play football and they just run around the pitch. That was Kolo Touré for me in his early days at Arsenal. That was Kolo Touré to a T. And then gradually Wenger moulded him and he turned out to be a massive part of our team for quite a while, didn't he, Kolo Touré?
I remember one of his early games, and I can't remember who it was. It was a big player, and I think Touré just ran straight into him and knocked him flying. And like you say, he was just like running around like a kid.
He was a much bigger, stronger fella than he looked, actually, I think, if you look at Touré.
Isn't there a story? Sorry, Fergus. Isn't there a story about Kolo Touré when he first turned up for training at the Arsenal? Was it down at Colney and wiped one of the superstars out? I can't remember who it was, but he wasn't very popular for a while. It was only a training game or something, and he's absolutely clattered them. It might have been Bergkamp. I don't know. One of them it was. Yeah, one of them.
I think that's one of Ray Parler's stories, isn't it? It might have been 2 or 3 of them, and he might have done Wenger as well.
That's it. That's what I'm thinking of, Andy. Yeah.
But staying on the defence, the 98-99 team only let in 17 goals in the league.
Yeah.
And it was actually our goal scoring that stopped us winning the league. We only scored 59 goals. And then the Invincible team only conceded 26 goals. And that was Wenger's defence, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You had Loren, Campbell, Touré, and Cole was the main back four. And Lehmann in goal.
Just don't move on.
We could do that.
Don't move on for a minute from 98 because it was Wenger's second season. And what we shouldn't forget is that not only did he win the league, he did the double. He did the double, our second double. So that needs to be mentioned. Comfortable win over Newcastle in the FA Cup final. Job done.
And that was with the assistance of Ian Wright, who closed on Cliff Bastion's goal-scoring record. He scored his 179th goal against Bolton in September 97. So just before that, at the start of that 97-98 season, Trev. Ian Wright, we talked about him many a time before on Gooner to Gooners and other podcasts. Talk to me. Do you think Wenger got the best out of Ian Wright?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Well, when I think of righty, and these two boys will know better than me. So either of you, Mark or Andrew, pick up on this. There's a story that that Dean had to choose between Wright and Rioch, isn't there? Because they just couldn't be in the same room together. Mm-hmm. Any meat on that bone, boys? Was it a case of it's either Wright or it's Rioch? What's your views?
We don't know. It's obviously something that the Dean thought about, but I would have said that he would have gone for Wright over Rioch. Yeah, there was just too much that not going right with Rioch.
Yeah. Well, for a first season, Rioch didn't do bad. We're taking a backward step here. We've got to be careful. But Rioch didn't. He got fifth in his first season. It could have been worse, couldn't it? New manager.
Yeah, not too bad. Right. Got the team playing as a team, but they just didn't have that killer instinct, did they? That Wenger came in and gave them.
Yeah.
He added that little bit.
I would imagine that Ian Wright and his personality, as much as he's a staunch Gooner and an Arsenal fan, and it was great for England, great for Arsenal. I could imagine his personality not working very well with Wenger's sort of professor-like style, and that's probably why he was moved on later to West Ham and Celtic and a few other clubs. And then between Dean and Wenger, they brought in the likes of Vieira, which you talked about already, Petit, Anelka. Anelka was we bought him for 500,000 and sold him for 27 million. Am I right, Mark?
23.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that Anelka had too much influence from outside that affected that young man's game. Definitely. One more thing before we move on from 98, right? One more thing we got before we move on from 98. I'll come back to Anelka, Fergus, I promise. 98, last game of the season at Highbury was when Tony Adams scored one of the most iconic goals ever scored on that patch of green. And it still says a shiver down my spine now.
Yeah.
Thinking about him running through on that ball from Steve Bold, wasn't it? Steve Bold putting through, crash. Yeah, so anyway, back to Anelka.
Was that the Everton goal?
It was the Everton goal, Fergus. Yes, mate, it was indeed. Yeah. But back to Anelka, I didn't want us to sell him for any money. And because he weren't that, he was only, what was he, only early 20s when we sold him.
Yeah, 21, 22, yeah.
I don't think he was. We bought him when he was, 17?
Yeah, he's very young, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he'd only been 19, I think, when we sold him.
And he had too much outside influence. I think they were very influential. His family, I think. I'm not. That's not.
Yeah, no. You are right, Trev. His two brothers were his agents, and they were very mercenary, and they had they had a goal to make sure that they capitalised the best they could on the asset they had, and the asset they had was Nicholas Anelka and his wonderful ability to play football, and being young, being rich, his attitude stunk a little bit along the way. Probably
Ferg. His replacement weren't bad, was he?
Well, that's what. Well, people. When we signed his replacement, I remember seeing him playing for France, but he was playing, I think, left back or something like left wing back for France.
I thought he was left-handed. Fergus, come back.
What's he got the hand for?
I wasn't even going to mention the hand of frog. That was out of order, Trev. That was really out of order. I didn't even mention Maradona.
Was it handball though?
Yes, he said it himself.
Yeah, but it was actually
he said it himself.
It was accidental, wasn't it? He wasn't doing it on purpose.
No.
Why did he smile? He's smiling more than Trevor is smiling now about his little joke. Thierry Henry, when he was interviewed on TV, gone, it was accidental. So yeah. But look, Thierry Henry was signed. He failed to score in his first 8 games, but he would go on to eclipse the man we just talked about before, was Ian Wright. In a little over 8 years, his first goal was versus Southampton. And yeah, as I said, changed his position. Andy, do you want to talk about the way they changed how he played? for France, and then how Wenger was determined, and he's done it many times since, trying to play players who weren't in their natural position in a different position.
I'll start off with a little story. I was stood outside the King's Head on the corner on Blackstock Road with my brother, and the date was the 28th of November 1999. It was before a game against Derby, and we were talking about Henry, and my brother said to me, "I've seen enough of him now. He ain't going to make it here." He said he just can't score goals. And I was saying, yeah, well, I'd look through, and as you said, he didn't score many goals up until that point. And then in that game, he scored twice, and he didn't stop scoring after that. And I always remind my brother of it. But yeah, he struggled early on. You know, I think Wenger was playing him on the left wing to try and give him a bit of match experience and not put too much pressure on him. And then in that game, he's played him up front. I think it's probably the first, well, not the first, but he'd only played him as a central striker once or twice before then, and quite a lot of times as a substitute. And like I say, he scored 2 goals in that game. And then if you look after that, he just kept scoring and scoring and scoring, and he continued throughout his whole career at Arsenal. You know, and it wasn't just the number of goals; it was the quality of them as well. He could do absolutely everything, and he's got Dennis Bergkamp feeding him. And then later he had Robert Pires feeding him. Yeah, and he's got Freddie Ljungberg there as well. And in my mind, you know, it's a close run thing. You know, people talk about who's the best player ever to play for Arsenal. For me, it's Thierry Henry, because after that lean spell at the start, he did it consistently until the, his end at the Arsenal. And even when he came back, he did it as well. You know, whereas Dennis Bergkamp was a fantastic player, but he had long spells where he just wasn't in form. But Henry, it was every single game, and the other teams, they just didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah, aren't we lucky as Arsenal fans, boys? Aren't we lucky, because you've just put a cracking case there, Andy, for Thierry Henry as the greatest player you've seen at Arsenal. I would choose someone else, but you can choose any of probably a dozen players that have played for Arsenal and make a case for them being the best players that have played for Arsenal. And I just giggle because it made me think that what's his name? That central defender's left that mob up the road this week, and they were saying that Alderweireld and what's the other one? What's his name? The two of them, they're one of the greatest defensive partnerships that the Premier League's ever seen. When I fell off my stall, I nearly broke a collarbone. It's hilarious, you know. So that's what other teams have to consider as being their best players. We're spoiled. You know, I personally would choose Adams, Fergus. I don't know who you choose, because I think that Adams was a value to the club as a defender and as a person, and so that would be my choice. But I couldn't argue Henry. I couldn't argue Bergkamp. I couldn't argue one of a dozen players, probably. It's a wonderful club to be a part of.
And that time
I think that era,
there was like that fantastic era to go and watch the team playing week in, week out.
Yeah.
And at times they were
I was about to say the same thing. That era, you could pick probably the majority of the squad and say that they're outstanding players. I moved into the area around this time, 99, and my first game was against Bradford City on the 24th of August, 1999, and Henry did come on as a sub, I believe, from memory. And there was people, I was in the West Upper, and people were tutting and moaning every time he'd lost the ball and so on. And people like your brother were saying, nah, he ain't all that. And here we go. What was your opinion of?
He's no Anelka, is he? After Anelka, Anelka had a good season the season before.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Very true. Mark, what's your thoughts on Anelka and Henry, and preference over which one you preferred?
Well, obviously Henry. But yeah, I mean, you can't add much other than what the chaps have said, really. he was a top quality player, and as Andy said, he not only scored a shed of the goals, he scored a lot of quality goals. It wasn't just like tap-ins and Lineker-esque 2 foot, took goals from 2 foot. There was 30-yarders, there was dribbles, there was there's a whole gamut of different decent goals that he scored. I mean, if you're going to go for the greatest player I've seen, probably Bergkamp, but as the other guy said, you could argue for anyone, couldn't you? I mean, I personally, I used to love Lindbergh when he had his red hair, but as well. So you can make loads of arguments, can't you, for different players?
Yeah.
But this is what I was saying to you earlier, Fergus. This is why one of the things that is, even though we had great players, we didn't win enough, in my view, with that amount of quality in the team.
That was so right, Fergus. That was the one chance, that era from 2000 to 2006 was the only chance that Arsenal were going to win the Champions League in my lifetime. I've missed the boat, I've missed the boat. Gutted.
And maybe not in your lifetime, but maybe not in your lifetime, mate. But it's definitely going to be a little while yet. Look, listen, we went on to win the league at Old Trafford, and then we completed a double beating Chelsea 2-0 in the FA Cup. We won the FA Cup against Southampton in a 1-0 with Perez. And the double against with Chelsea and Tottenham in 2004, and that was the Invincible season. So, like, winning the league at Old Trafford, winning the league again, I might point out, again at White Hart Lane, are great achievements for us. And the undefeated year was 2004. We went undefeated in the whole domestic season, and then continued to be 49 games unbeaten. The last time anybody went a whole season unbeaten was 115 years previously with Preston North End. And Arsenal later eclipsed Nottingham Forest, who had gone 42 games unbeaten, by us going 49 games unbeaten. And that game finished in October 2000. That ended in October 2004, and there was the Battle of the Buffet with Cesc Fabregas and his pizza, allegedly, although he had come out and said it, shoving a pizza in Fergie's face. Trev, do you remember that era? What's your thoughts on that era?
Fergus, I can remember it, son. I can remember it, but I'm sorry I keep taking a step back, Fergus. But
no, I do, mate. I'm struggling today, honestly.
You're moving on, and I've got stuff in there. You see, because when we won the double in 2002, that was the year we got. That was the year we stole Campbell from that lot up the road, And it needs to be mentioned that yes, was one of the greatest pieces of transfer skullduggery that I've ever seen. Not only did we get him from Tottenham, we got him for nothing. We let him run his contract down, and we nicked him. And it was the most brilliant piece of transfer work I've ever seen. And also that same season when we won the double was the year of another iconic goal scored for Arsenal. And it was the commentary that made it. Was Ray Parlour's goal in the final. It's only Ray Parlour. Smash, in she goes. Tim Lovejoy, eat your words, son. And I like Tim Lovejoy. But so that needed to be mentioned because we won the league by 7 points that year. We got Sol Campbell. And we won the FA Cup, and we've done the double again. This is great. And then in 2003, we won the FA Cup, as you said, against Southampton. We didn't get anywhere near. We finished second in the league, but we didn't get anywhere near Man U. I'm not impressing too much, boys. I've got this written down. I'm not remembering all of this. But then the 2004 Invincible season, right, was we were invincible. We were good. We were brilliant. But we should have won the Champions League that season. That's the one that grates me more than losing to Barca. Because we should have put Chelsea away in the semi. They nicked a couple of goals at Highbury that they shouldn't have scored. And I still to this day say we just relaxed and lost a bit of concentration. I honestly do. 2004 was the year, should have been our year in the Champions League. and we got done by Chelsea. What's your view? I see you nodding, Andy.
Yeah.
I was actually going to go to Mark for. Hang on, Andy. I was going to go to Mark first because Mark, prior to this, you said it was around that time that you just went. It's probably 2006, I think you said that that you stopped watching. Actually, go to Andy first, and we'll come back to you about the time we're talking about afterwards. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're right there, but I think that's when the silly defensive mistakes started to creep in. And that Chelsea, the Chelsea games were, sort of like epitomised that. Yeah, that was the season that we should have won the Champions League.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I totally agree with you there.
And then when we look at the Rooney dive to end our 49 game unbeaten run, do we all agree? Okay, we're all red and white through and through. We're probably going to agree, but it was definitely a dive, wasn't it? A great achievement by the team, but it was definitely a dive. Mark, do you want to come in on that one?
Well, to be honest, I can't remember much of it. I mean, I looked looking at the stuff. It was Campbell, wasn't it? They accused. They said he dived over his feet. I mean, it was a dive. But I mean, they would do it, didn't they? There's nothing you can do about it.
I'll go a step further. I don't care. I'll say that fat balding twat, right, from Manchester wasn't touched by Sol Campbell, and Sol Campbell is the most patient man in the world. Because if I was Sol Campbell, I'd still be hunting Rooney down today. I'd still be looking for him. Look at whatever angle you want. Sol Campbell did not touch Wayne Rooney that day, and that was. I often say it, but that was the first one I can really, well, not the first, but one of the main ones in my mind that stuck out as, in some games of football, the best cheats win the games. And that was a prime example that day. The best cheat won the game because Campbell never touched him. Sorry, Andy, I cut you off, mate.
No, I was just nodding in agreement, but that was also the game. Mike Riley was the referee, weren't he? And some of the decisions that he gave in that game were unbelievable. Two of the Man United players should have been sent off at least. Ferdinand for pulling Lundberg down as he was clean through. Any other player would have been sent off for that.
Wasn't that at the height of the battle between Fergie and Wenger, where people talk about the Wenger thing with Mourinho, but the biggest managerial battle ever was always with Fergie and Arsene Wenger, and people because it was at Old Trafford, people talked about Fergie time and his influence and his hair dryers on his players and his influence on referees. Do you think that Andy had that influence? That it was the Fergie factor on?
No, it was Mike Riley. Mike Riley, the man's as bent as a 9-bob note.
Absolutely.
And now he's in charge. He's in charge of the PGMOL.
Absolutely.
And the standard of refereeing in the Premier League has been awful for years underneath him, and we've seen it with VAR in the Euros.
Yeah, totally agree.
The way that it was used, as opposed to how it's used in England.
Well,
there's something not right with Mike Riley.
No doubt. That game against Man U that day, I was trying not to mention it because it makes my blood boil, Andy. It does. Right, from what I remember, was that the day Neville hacked Reyes all over the park all game?
Yes, it was.
I think they took turns at him, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Awful.
I think, wasn't there not 9 possible card offences? I think I've read somewhere that were committed on Antonio Reyes on that game by the Neville twins, twin brothers.
That was probably what saw him off of the game in England. Being kicked about like that, and he's obviously thought, "Oh, what's the point of staying here?" And
getting no protection,
being allowed to do that.
Yeah. Agree.
So we move on. We move on to 2006.
We've not done 2004, 2005, Fergus.
Oh, sorry, 2004, 2000. Well, we started on 2004 with the undefeated and invincible year. 2005 was the FA Cup. I actually haven't noted that down, unfortunately. But it was the 2005, the worst FA Cup final I ever saw. That I was delighted. It was the most boring FA Cup final I've ever seen. But Patrick Vieira left with the FA Cup. This is my running off the top of my head stuff. Left for the FA Cup after a really dire game. It went to penalties and we done them. Trev, your opinion then is different to mine, is it?
Yeah, we won the cup. The game's never dire when we win the FA Cup, mate. Never
exactly.
dire. Over the moon with it.
Yeah.
Over the moon with it.
Yeah.
We played the game we needed to play. Did boredom off the field. I don't care what anybody thinks. We played the Arsenal way when it was required. And the legend that is, and he is a legend. It's used too often that word, but Vieira is undoubtedly a legend at Arsenal. Yeah. His very last kick for Arsenal, very last time he ever kicked a ball on a football field for Arsenal, wins us the FA Cup. You can't not mention that final. You can't not be happy about that. It could be as boring as it wants, but when they're parading that cup round the field at the end of the game, I don't give a damn.
Don't get me wrong, Trev. I was delighted. I lost my voice singing Vieira in my local pub. So, I was over the moon and delighted. But it was a dire game. It was an awful game to watch. As an Arsenal fan,
it wasn't,
we didn't care.
Because we won.
We won.
Tactical genius.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Fergus, you're outvoted here, son. I'm liking this.
I am. Totally. 3-1.
and Philip Senderos.
And the thing is, Fergus,
Ronaldo and Rooney at bay. He didn't let them score. What a great player.
Yeah.
And the thing is a game could be the best game we've ever seen, but if we lose, it's a shit game.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's just how football is. You know.
It's all about the result, isn't it? It's not about how you play. Although the amount of times that we've argued and discussed over the last couple of seasons that we ask players to leave it on the pitch, and we don't care about okay, we'd like a win, but we don't care about the results. But it's all about just putting the effort in, and that's what they did in 2005. Tactically, nullified Man United, who were at that time a better team. Our team was aging. So we're on to Trev. Can we move on to 2006 in the Champions League final yet?
Although we did finish above them in the league that season, 6 points clear of them in the league, and we scored 29 more goals than them that season.
There you go.
Okay, corrected again.
We probably should have been favourites for that, although we didn't have Henry playing in the final, which didn't help that.
Yeah. Well, you see, that was the time when money started coming into Chelsea, didn't it? They started buying it all. They started buying it all, and then, of course, the real skill of a skillful manager building a manager's side was the start of it going out the window, and whoever had the most money buying trophies.
Sad, actually, when you think about it. You had Chelsea, who were about to go out of business about 2 or 3 years before that, with on debates and everything else. Once the Russian come in, then they come along and they've got all these trophies that have, as you said, Trev, bought. Yes, they are playing good football, but it just doesn't sit 100% well with us. We had a good Champions League run, but we lost to Barcelona. There was huge amounts of speculation over Thierry Henry's future, that he would end up in Barcelona. But the game itself was ruined by a refereeing decision, first of all. That wasn't Sol Campbell got sent off. Who got sent off?
Lehmann.
Jens Lehmann.
Jens Lehmann got sent off. And something I've never agreed with is, if you're going to give a keeper a red card, that's a jeopardy in itself and a punishment in itself. And then so he gets sent off, and then he gets a penalty. So if you're going to award a penalty, then you should actually just give him a yellow card.
He didn't get a penalty.
He was outside the box.
He didn't get a penalty. He was sent off for a professional outside the box. Yeah.
But it effectively ruined the game, though, didn't it, Trev?
Well, it did ruin the game, but not until right to the very end, Fergus. Firstly, I thought that I felt very sorry for Perez because I didn't think that it should have been Perez that Wenger took off. I thought Wenger made a massive error of judgment there in that. I mean, you can see what his mindset was on the spur of the moment. He's thinking, got to stay defensive now and block. But he took off our main outlet in Perez, and I think it cost us. But then, of course, Sol Campbell scores another iconic goal, although it's a losing sides goal. Sol Campbell scores, and we run out of puff at the end, I think, didn't we? We'd played back foot and we'd worked our socks off with 10 men against what was probably, well, it turned out to be the best side in Europe, records will show. And we just run out of steam, and last 14 minutes, we give the 2 goals away. And it's a sad, sad day for us all, you know. But, it was hard to take that. One of the hardest defeats to take that second, probably second to the Chelsea defeat in the semi-final a couple of seasons earlier, because I know I'm biased, but I honestly think that we keep 11 men on the field, we win that game.
Is anybody with me?
Certainly keeping Lehman on and not having Almunia on.
Yeah.
True. Anybody with me on Henry's performance in that game and the links and the rumours to his eventual move to Barcelona? That corner where he goes down on his haunches. Yes, they all were blown out their asses by that stage. But it just looks like he... Does anybody think he looked like he gave up? Or is that just my head?
Who are you asking?
Anybody. Mark, go on.
Don't know. You don't know what's going on in his head. Do you? You don't know what's going on in his head. He could have given up. He could have been thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get a start going again." You know, I mean, he missed a lot of chances, didn't he? As I recall. So, you know, he might have been.
I don't think for a second he's give up. Not a second.
No.
Not a second.
Okay.
He's just scored 3 goals in the last game of the season ever played at Highbury. He scored a hat-trick on the hallowed turf the last ever game. And trust me, he weren't giving up in that final against Barca. He wanted to win it, I reckon, 100%. But on the night, it wasn't to be. It wasn't to be.
Well, Trev, it's like you know how we do this. As moving to the Emirates, the promise, the dream, the reality, the credit crisis. The 2010 game for Arsenal was the final game at Highbury on May the 7th, 2006. Arsenal said goodbye to Highbury after 93 years, their so-called spiritual home. And we did it in spectacular fashion. It was a fantastic day. There, you might see it behind me somewhere. I've got the picture behind there, and you've got Arsenal draped in red and white with everyone in the shirts. And we beat Wigan 4-2, but we didn't make an easy job of it. But to add a little bit of cream on top of the our cherry on top of the pie is by us winning that game, we knocked Tottenham down to 5th, and we got 4th place. We moved to the Emirates. The first game was the Bergkamp Testimonial on July 22nd, 2006. I ended up being on holidays, and my brother, who's a Man United fan, ended up going to that game, which was really still pisses me off to this day. Let's talk about the promise, the dream versus the reality, and the influence and the issues that were surrounding that, which is the credit crisis, and the change in fortune and how we're to do things. Mark, you scoffed when I said the promise and the dream. Why?
It wasn't so much that. It was when you said that Highbury was our so-called spiritual home. It's not so-called. It was, and it is. It still is. Whatever people say. Highbury's what made Arsenal. And basically we were just sold a bunch of beans, weren't we? Which didn't really flower very well.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, because we've won. We haven't really looked like winning the league, aside from 2008. But forget that one. Since we moved there, we've won the few cups. I mean, I still don't see it I don't see it as some. Okay, the difference is someone said this to me once. He said when I went to watch Arsenal at Highbury, I used to say to people, I'm going to watch the Arsenal. When I go to the Emirates, I say I'm going to watch football.
Okay.
And it's a completely different thing. It's taken, in my view, it's taken away the not intimacy, but the fact that for me, Highbury was Arsenal. So the fact that we're not there anymore means, we're just a club wearing the same colours.
Is that not a generational thing that there's men of our age who grew up and were brought up from 7 or 8 when Trev went to his first game in 1913, and at Highbury, and moved to the Emirates, and they go, there's nothing like Highbury. It's always like what was better. The stadium, you'd have to agree, is outstanding. There are issues that you could say with it, but it's not
outstanding. It's just a bog standard 60,000 seater. It's exactly the same as the Lisbon's one, isn't it? Is it Lisbon? It was in Portugal. It's exactly the same as the Lisbon one. It's exactly the same. It was basically, I think it was the same architect made it. I won't be wrong about the architect, but it's the same stadium. It's not outstanding. It's just a breeze block thing with a bit of steel. It's horrible.
Rather than picking up that, the question was: is it a generational thing?
Very possibly, yeah. Wouldn't say that, but if you think about in 30 years' time, people might be saying the same thing. Might be saying, "Why did we move?" Who are younger than us, and so what was the point in moving? If you look at it historically, we were successful at Highbury, and we're not at the Emirates.
It's an interesting point. Let me just chuck something in here, right? Do you think it would have been looked at in a different light if we had beaten Barcelona, Andy, and took the European Championship to the Emirates with us and paraded it round the ground at the first game? It's something.
Most definitely, yeah. And also, it might have kept some of the players there that, Ashley Cole left that summer, didn't he? We swapped him for William Gallas and a few quid, and I think that was probably a bad way to start off. And as you say, if we come back with the Champions League, and we've got the Champions League trophy there in the stadium, it would have made that first season there so much more better. And probably, if we'd have kept Cole, if we won the Champions League, there's something to say to Ashley Cole. Look, we're winning the big cups now. Stay with us.
Yeah.
Andy, I'll talk about the reality. The reality was in 2008, 2009, there was a worldwide credit crisis, no different than the pandemic is now, but a financial, serious financial handicap on organizations to get cash to. We're in the middle of a redevelopment Highbury to turn into these fantastic flats, and also the commitment of building lots of other ancillary buildings and social housing and housing that we're going to sell on to pay for the stadium. Do you not think that, if that credit crunch didn't happen, that we wouldn't have had to sell off the likes of, Van Persie and so on?
Well, we didn't sell Van Persie till well after that, 2013.
No, but I just picked it.
But
yeah.
The thing is, a lot of people will say that, but I'm no financial expert. But there are plenty of people out there who will say that the extra money that we were generating through moving to the Emirates, it didn't really impact us. Or it didn't. The credit crunch didn't impact us that way. I think most of the flats from the Highbury development and the area around the Emirates had pretty much been sold by the time that the credit crunch started to bite. So, it wasn't that much of a financial burden on us.
My understanding, and I work in financial services, but not in property and that sort of stuff. My understanding, and my brothers work more in that side of area. My understanding was that Lombard, which got into difficulties and so on in that credit crunch, were Royal Bank of Scotland, who took over Lombard, were funding the Highbury project, and they insisted on they had to renew the finances on there, and they couldn't renew them at the rates they were. So it was more punitive and did put restrictions on them financially. And the only way they could renegotiate those loans were, despite Marx wanting to get rid of Wenger in 2004, 2006, whatever it was one of the conditions was that they kept Arsene Wenger in situ, and also part of his contract that he got in the first 7 years of Highbury, that he got 5 years of top four Champions League football. You know anything on that?
Yeah, something along them lines we're never going to know, because we're not party to those negotiations. But one thing that we do know is that Arsenal renegotiated the loans that they took out to build the Emirates afterwards. But then they could do that. And the reason being, and this happened with Highbury as well. So what they'd done with the Emirates, when they took out the loan to build it, and it started off as a £200 million project, and then it ballooned because they built these flats and houses around as well. So it became like a £400 million project. They had nothing there to borrow that money against. They probably had a bit of collateral in Highbury that they could borrow against, because they got something there, bricks and mortar there. But while the Emirates was being built, it was just a flat piece of land, and the building itself stopped for a while. Because I can remember some of the Tottenham fan at work having a dig at me about it, that, well, that ain't going to happen then, is it? And we're not going to get a new stadium, and we've got all this money that we borrowed. But once the stadium is built and completed and we've moved in, Arsenal have then got a massive asset that they can then take out another mortgage for a much longer period, because the loans that they originally took out were for a short period only, and at a higher, not necessarily at a higher rate. But once the the Emirates was built, they've got this asset, and they know that Arsenal are going to make a lot more money out of this. So banks will lend them money for a much longer period, even if it's the interest rate slightly higher. It then means that their yearly payments are reduced. So as soon as the Emirates was finished and Arsenal renegotiated the loans, their yearly their
expenditure reduced.
Actually came down. And then on top of that, we've got an extra 24,000 people going to games, or buying tickets at the very least, and some of them are paying an amazing amount of money for them. So our income has rocketed up, and our expenditure has actually dropped from what it was when we first moved in.
It's well documented that we've got the highest match day expenditure now with Tottenham, with their new stadium. Pre-COVID, we're on track to match us. You say we don't know about certain things in the statement I made, but the bit about Wenger having to get 5 out of 7 years in the first 7 years of Highbury into the top four. He actually said himself in some interview, I think it was on Sky or something like that. So I did see that, and he actually achieved 7 out of 7 in that case. He didn't continue to do that. We went through some years when we had Eduardo, and it looked like we could have won the league. Was that 2010? I think 2010. Was that 08?
Yeah.
Go on, Trev. Go on.
I'm doing it again, but moving from Highbury is something close to my heart, right? And we were sold some promises, right? But we were sold some promises by some proper men of Arsenal. Ken Fryer was very, very vociferous about it, as was David Dean, I believe. And we were told that we were told that the transport hubs would be sorted. Well, Drayton Park doesn't even open on match days, and Holloway Road has never been developed. We were told that ticket prices would be low for the community, and we would see value in our season tickets, and that never happened. But the thing that was said, and people often misword this, people think that we were told that we were going to leave Highbury to be successful. Well, we weren't told that. we were told that we have to leave Highbury to continue to be successful. And that's the one that upsets me the most. That's the one that upsets me the most, because nothing could be further opposite. The treatment of us fans, in my opinion, has gone rapidly downhill since we left Highbury, and the success of my football team has gone rapidly. Not rapidly, actually opposite. It's been a slow but steady decline with the odd upward trend along the way, but albeit very briefly. So that's the problem with moving to the Emirates. We've not had the success that we hoped for and were told we would get. So, that's why I struggle with the Emirates. I struggle greatly with it. I want to, and that's why I mentioned about the Champions League and what would have happened if we'd have took the Champions League there. Would it have been a different setup? So, yeah, we were sold some promises, and from my perspective, none of them have really been kept.
One of the things that I always thought would happen was at Highbury, the pitch was very narrow, because it had to be to fit in between Avenel Road and them houses in Highbury Hill. When we moved to the Emirates, the pitch was widened. It was much, much wider. And I thought with the players that we had, it would give us a lot more space. Because what I found was at Highbury was that the away teams would come and they would pack their defence, and we didn't have the width of the pitch to stretch them out. Whereas moving to the Emirates, we had that then. We could stretch them out. But it just never happened. The players that were there in 2004 that could do that were not there by 2006, 2007. And the players that came in, they just weren't as good as the ones that we had that could have done that and made advantage of this new pitch.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, mate. And I'm just looking now. After we lost the Champions League final, when we moved to the Emirates, in my opinion, that's when you'd expect us to attract better players, and whether it was just the policy of who we went for or what, because we'll talk about it in a minute. My view is that towards the end of his reign, we became a bit of an experiment for Wenger. That's my view. But going back, the standard of the player we were bringing in every season wasn't anywhere near what we would expect at our great club. And clubs worked us out. We'd do it for season after season. The transfer window would open. All us fans would be thinking, yes, here we go. The transfer window's open. We'd do nothing all through the transfer window. Then 10 minutes before the end, we'd make 2 or 3 panic buys, pay much over the odds for them. And they weren't any good. They weren't up to the standards of the Arsenal Football Club. And that didn't happen once or twice. That happened for several years, in my view, of course.
Yeah, totally agree.
Listen, first opportunity to get any silverware in the Emirates was 2011 against Birmingham. My boss is a Birmingham fan, and I remember saying to him, this is going to be easy. This is going to be easy. And boy, did he give me grief. He still gives me grief to this day. Koscielny and it just had a total mare. It was dreadful. Mark, you talk to me. I know it's going to be a man of many words, so there's probably going to be about 5, and that will sum up your thoughts on this game. But can I have those 5, 6, maybe 10 words about what you thought about that final?
No.
One word. A short one like that. But Fergus, you see, something you just said then just backs up what I was talking about just now, because you said our first chance at silverware was the League Cup against Birmingham in 2011. Is that 5 seasons after we moved into the Emirates? 5 seasons of waiting for these promises to materialise, and nothing.
We did have opportunities with 2008, which Mark corrected me on, and 2010 we looked like we could have been on there, but key injuries to Eduardo and Ramsey scuppered that. But it was the first time we got to a point where we should have come home with a trophy, and that was meant to light up the Emirates, rekindle Wenger's career, the love of Wenger and everything else. Mark, do you want to expand on that very eloquent explanation?
Really? Because, I mean, we gave Birmingham the chance to take the mick out of us, didn't we? and they did.
Yeah.
That's all you can say, really. We were atrocious. We didn't. I mean, to be honest with you, can't remember watching it.
It's an Arsenal special.
Did you
It was like Luton. It was like West Ham in the old FA Cup days. It was just a day you turned up, you thought you were going to win it easily, and we played like blonkers, and we lost. And that's all you can say, really. There's not much more to say, is there? We were awful.
What Mark's just said there about it was like Luton. Who was the villain against Luton? Gus Caesar. And as I said last week, he was fouled. Who were the villains in the Birmingham game? Szczesny and Koscielny. How much stick have they had about that since then? In the same, people don't talk about. Yeah. They don't talk about Koscielny as being, one of the worst defenders we've ever had, do they?
Yeah.
At last, I can do it. At last, I can do it. I have. I haven't. He's had a season here and there where he's been okay, and games where he's been outstanding, but he's been too. Per Mertesacker, as slow as he was the only reason why he had a career, because he read Koscielny's game and covered for him in so many ways, and that's my view. I'll stick with it. The guy done plenty for us, but peeling off an Arsenal shirt and unveiling where did he go? Olympic Lyon or somewhere else it was.
No idea.
Poor form, mate. You don't do that.
I totally agree with you, folks. I've always said that.
Yeah, but for Gus Caesar, that was the end of his Arsenal career. For Koscielny, he was there for years afterwards. Yeah,
and he was never very good. Now, this is a really important part for me now of Wenger's career, because, and I've got to explain, I was never vociferous against Wenger going. I never shouted and screamed the house down because I appreciated what he had done for our great club. But I thought that 2010, 2011 was when he should have graciously held his hands up and said, I've been worked out here. Opposition have worked me out. I haven't got a plan B. I'm going to go while I can still hold my head up a little bit and be off. For me, this is when Wenger should have walked this time.
And I think you're right, Trev. The majority of people will agree with you that that's where the tide started turning. I didn't turn at that point. I was a little bit later, and we'll get into that. Some people were earlier, like what Mark said. But yeah, that was the point where people went, hang on a second. He's run out of ideas. And Andy, what were your thoughts at that point then?
Well, not so much my thoughts, but looking back, I'm just looking back at what had actually happened in them few years running up to 2011.
It's history, not thoughts.
Yeah, so he this is when Chelsea and all of a sudden Man City have come into a load of money, and they've started poaching our players. So Ashley Cole has gone, and then Gal Clichy and Adebayor, they took off us, and Nasri. And what Wenger has done is seen that they're paying over the odds for our players to take them away, although I'm not even sure we had to sell them. And so what he's done is he's put young players that are coming through onto big money contracts to stop them from being poached away. But the problem was that with that is all of a sudden we're spending an awful lot more money on wages than we were before, which is taking away our transfer kitty. And he's gambling on these young players being that good and staying at the club to make them successful. But they weren't. They weren't that, as good as he thought they were. There was Denilson, Giroud, Bentner as three prime examples. And they were, perhaps fairly average Premiership players. But for the money that they were being paid, top dollar for what they, for average players.
Absolutely.
And that was his big problem there. And I think that came to a head around about 2010-11.
So 2014, eventually, we make our way to Wembley. And after 9 years without a trophy, there's a serious amount of pressure, as we just talked about, on Wenger. We arrive at Wembley. It wasn't the easiest of semi-finals against Wigan. I remember being at it, and we beat Hull. We conceded twice in the opening 8 minutes, but Santi Cazorla bended a stunning free kick. And then the aforementioned Lauren Kilshenley gets one, and in extra time, Aaron Ramsey gets the third. Gets the third. Yeah, just in 3 minutes into the second half of extra time. I had a bruise on my back for about 4 days from the way the Wembley Cop End went, and it was just unreal. What a great day! My first FA Cup final, and I at Wembley, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it took the pressure off Wenger, and for me, that was probably the first time where I thought he should go. We then went on to Villa in 2015. It was a really, I was going to say boring, but it wasn't boring because we won. We won 4-0 convincingly against Villa. And the ultimate moment where I did think that Wenger should have gone was the 2017 FA Cup final. We beat Man City unexplainably in the semi-final, only to be drawn against hugely in form Chelsea, who had knocked everyone aside with all their rubles, and we ended up with them. I went to that game, and Trev, we didn't know each other at that point, did we?
No, thankfully.
Okay, moving swiftly on. But I went to that game with some friends, proper friends. Went to that game with some friends, and we had a really good.
You shouldn't be putting an S on the end of that. You probably went with your friend. I don't think there was more. I think we can go more than one there.
Well, actually, you are right. I went alone and I met with friends.
Yeah. Okay, then you must have bought them loads of beer or something. But
I did actually.
You got that. It's interesting what you say, though, Fergus. The Hull, when we beat Hull 3-2, it's strange. It's strange because Arsenal, Mark and myself spoke about it. Arsenal got this habit of putting in some poor performances in cup finals, particularly at Wembley. We can be awful. But that day when we went 2-0 down, I still didn't think we'd lose. I still knew we'd win that game. In my head, I thought we'll win this game today. We won't lose this game today. But what's a good debating point, Fergus, is you mentioned, mate, that the FA Cup took the pressure off of Wenger, and it likely did. But the FA Cup had lost its sparkle a little bit by then, hadn't it? You know, I mean, we can go back
from that.
The early days of Ferguson at Man United. The FA Cup did actually save his career. That's been made knowledge.
Yeah,
winning the FA Cup. And I when it got round to that year, when was it, 2014, when we beat Hull, I don't think it had that much of an influence. Yeah, it helped, but it wasn't that much of an influence. And I don't like to think that made Wenger a better or more respected manager in any way, because we were on a bad downward spiral by then, mate.
Well, I think it did in a way, because he does have. He has, as the manager, won the most FA Cups of any manager in the history of English football. So, on that respect, you have to respect him for that. I just think from the teams that he set out and did, we could have won a lot more. And the other thing is, about 14 is, had Kieran Gibbs not nodded their ball off the line, would have been 3 down in about 15 minutes, and there's no way we'd have come back from 3 down. Mm-hmm. Absolutely none. Yeah. And it was only because he was where he was, because the ball was, it was goal bound. It was there. And the other thing is, conversely, having said Wenger's got the best ever FA Cup record, he also has the worst ever Arsenal manager record of not winning a trophy in a period. It used to be held by George Morel before the First World War, and the period Wenger went trophyless is the longest any manager's ever done.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Never knew that. You'd have never guessed that. In a million years, you'd have never thought that.
And that's what I mean by dichotomy. He was fantastic at the start, and then he wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we get into the the 2017 FA Cup final and everything as I alluded to. Trevor, you've got a shirt on there, and that shirt's from the final game at Highbury.
Indeed.
Lovely red current traditional shirt.
So I'll do it again like last time.
Yeah, first brought out in 1913, I believe, is the last time we wore it. That, but I am correct, boys, aren't I?
You are, Fergus. How did you manage to know that?
Is he? Is he? Look at the confused look on Fergus's face.
Somehow, I think I might have cocked up along here.
No, Fergus,
please.
You're not. We didn't wear that in 1913.
No,
Okay.
As a matter of fact, that would be a good question to ask, wouldn't it? When did we first wear it? What do you reckon, boys?
I reckon so. Yeah. In which season did we first wear red currant as our home kit?
Yeah.
What a great good question.
I reckon.
Do I get a second? Do I get a second chance, or is my answer lodged at 1913?
Your answer's lodged. You're gone. Well, are we having a competition then, are we?
Yeah. And how about a little prize? What do you reckon? How
Go on,
about
me?
Yeah. I struggle with this camera bit. So here we have a copy of mine and Mark's and Josh James, who is deputy editor at Arsenal programme. A copy of our book, the Arsenal: The Complete Record, and that is the prize for answering the question of in which season did Arsenal first wear red currant as their first team home kit.
I'll tell you what, Fergus.
A little bit of a clue. I don't think it's 1913.
I'll tell you what, Fergus. In support of Andy and Mark's book, I sit here and I spout all this knowledge and yeah, a lot of it is in my head, but a lot of the stuff I actually find because I've got that in front of me. It's an absolutely amazing publication. It's a chance to win it. You need to get your entries in, people, because it is it's well worth the money to buy it anyway. But to win it for free, it's a cracking prize.
The easiest way to enter is enter your correct answer to me on Twitter at Guns and Ribbons. And if you want to copy the lads in, you got their Twitter handles on there. You got Gunnar Hilsey, Royal Arsenal MRA, and Gunnar_AK. With just the year you think that we first wore red currant. Not 1913. We will randomly pick somebody.
Just clarify, we want the season, okay? The first season that we wore that colour.
Okay. Okay. So, fine. Listen, we're on to, as I said, one of the greatest days I had out, which was the final against Chelsea. We had beat Man City in the semi-final. We were underdogs, and Chelsea had won nearly everything. We were outside the top four for the first time in Wenger's era since 95-96. And we go on to win the game 2-1. Rambo's Champagne Charlie George style celebration. What a game. What a day. Mark, can we get some excitement out of you?
This is the hat I wore.
He's got his hat on.
This is the hat I wore to the game, and that was it.
Is that
basically?
Is that showing you excited?
Maybe not. I was excited anyway. I'll tell you what. One of the things I do remember is at the end of it, they played "Sweet Caroline."
Da, da, da. Da, da. I know, and it hasn't stopped since, has it?
Quite right too, in my opinion. But I'd like to see them play a bit of Barry Manilow as well somehow.
All these young people, all these young fans that are giving Rob Holding a bit of stick. If you've not seen it, watch that final. Rob Holding was a superstar in that game.
Outstanding. Him and Mertesacker
were an outstanding game of football. And Rob Holding still lives on that with me today, although I don't think he's a bad player anyway, to be honest. But Rob only lives on that with me today.
I can't work out why people don't like him.
I agree.
Because he's not a superstar. You know what? That's a really good point, Mark and Trevor. It's almost around then that the outbreak of social media, the outbreak of Twitter, it was gradually getting, but everybody was on it and everybody has an opinion. And most of their opinions are absolute rubbish. And people just slate off players left, right, and centre. And it just got worse and worse and worse since. And we've seen all the stuff with like race and abuse for people. Like that, you got this Olympian who's gone off because she's got issues. And she's getting abuse on Twitter from the one and only Piers Morgan, etc. But I think, you know, Rob Holding for that game, that was probably his best game that he's ever played, and that was greatly helped by the experience of Per Mertesacker. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
It's a fact. Yeah. It's a fact.
Yeah, but I just can't see why people can't appreciate that Holding's is a half decent player. You know, he's not the greatest centre back we've ever had, but he's not bad. You know,
he's a vast improvement of what we had before him.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Agree, and I think that you need to set on your centre, your back four, definitely your centre back pairing, and just build around them. And I personally, I would do, but with the incoming Ben White, I think Holding's days he's going to drop back into the squad and possibly be sold off in the future. So they can stick the double up there wherever they want, is what I sang all night long in the Torch. And we burnt Chelsea scarves. I got a picture. I can't put it up here now, but I got a picture myself with an FA Cup, replica FA Cup. We haven't put any of the goals and the videos up on this one because everything is protected by Premier League and FA Cup at this point. So if we put them up, they'll just block this whole thing, and nobody will be able to see the thing. But that in my view was the point that Wenger should have gone. And at that point is, no matter how much you thought there was fractions among the fan base, it was after that he didn't leave is when it just escalated. There was get out of our club. There was the hatred of the Cronkies a little bit, but more so the stuff about Wenger. It's time to say goodbye, and the banners were coming out more and more vociferously. Easy for me to say at that time. Would you, Trevor, have agreed that ultimately, after taking that third FA Cup in 4 years, having a record 13 FA Cups, the man should have gracefully bowed out? And not historically, but in your opinion, why didn't he?
I don't think he should. As I said just now, Fergus, he shouldn't have been there then. He should have gone in 2010, 2011 for me. But the fact was he was still there and he won these FA Cups that you know, I'm sort of contradicting myself because they did sort of keep him winning trophies, which kept some people on his side. But yeah, of course he should have gone. I don't say a bad word. I wasn't screaming and shouting the house down for Wenger to leave. But I did want him to leave. And I honestly think that we became a bit of a footballing experiment for Wenger towards the end of his career. We went from being a big, strong, no-nonsense team to being a side that was pushed off the ball easily, bullied easily, beaten by sides that should never have beaten us, couldn't last a game. We'd lose many goals in the last 5 or 10 minutes of a game because we couldn't close a game out. We had centre-halves that were about 5'8". I honestly think that we had become an experiment for Wenger, and that saddens me greatly because from my perspective, you asked me, Fergus, so I'm giving my perspective, that sort of tarnishes, that's what you remember him for at the end of his career. The legacy he left was that he left a really poor side in a really bad way with players that weren't bothered about playing for him. I mean, that last season that Wenger was in charge, Sanchez and Ozil just didn't want to know. Just didn't want to know. I went to watch. I'm just going to check now. Just going to check Yeah, it was. I'll tell you a quick funny story because I've not told a story tonight. New Year's Eve 2017, we're away at West Brom, Fergus, right? And I'm thinking, oh, the missus ain't going to be happy here. So about 3 or 4 weeks before, I said to the missus, should we do something for New Year's Eve? Should we go to the big city? Should we go? She said, yeah, where are we going to go? I said, well, we'll give London a miss. How about Birmingham? I've heard it's a good night out in Birmingham. So I've booked her a nice posh hotel and she's all happy, all singing, all dancing. And about a week later, I said to her, Stone the Crows, you're not going to believe this, sweetheart. We're playing West Brom on New Year's Eve. It's a bloody Birmingham. So anyway, I said, and not only that, you're a very lucky girl because I've got you a ticket as well. So we drove over and we watched Arsenal play West Brom, and I think we drew the game. But Sanchez that day, a player who I rated very highly when he was on the top of his form, stood on the wing and sulked the game away. It was embarrassing. And that was like that sort of summed up Wenger's end to me. They weren't interested. He'd lost it. He'd experimented. He'd bought a small lightweight side, and we weren't going to do it. But just before I stop and let the lads have their say, I was so worried. You spoke about it right at the top of the show, Fergus. You got a T-shirt on. His last game at Highbury at the Emirates against Burnley. I was so worried that he was going to get booed or hissed or that.
We're going to do that in a second, Trev.
Okay, matey. I will stop there then, my friend.
Yeah. Guys, moving just to get to that point, Trev with his story, and he always loves a story, cues it up perfectly that we got the League Cup final against Man City in February 18. It was a freezing cold day. I was there, and it's one of the few times, there's only 2 games I've ever walked out of watching Arsenal, and that was when Almunia chucked the ball in the back of the net 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many times against West Brom. And Perez scored. I think it ended up being 3-2, but Almunia had just an awful game. But also that game, because of the atmosphere with the Wenger out sort of thing. I was at the Chelsea game for my birthday early in that February when the banners came out, which were all over the newspapers, and the atmosphere had just gone completely toxic. There was a mass exodus at 70 minutes when the second goal went in from City. And then we get to, he announces in April that he's going to stand down the Burnley home game. And exactly as Trevor said, everybody was worried that that toxic fan base could just turn. Mark, did you have that fear? Because as much as you said, you've had this opinion on Wenger much earlier on than other people, and you talked to me prior about like some of the people who were in marches and so on, and their varying opinions. But you had some common sense and balance in your head, I think, is the right way to describe it.
I never thought anyone would do anything big, because even though obviously his last however many years you want to say, from say 2011 onwards, were not particularly good. The other ones were. So most people would sort of say, okay, and the other thing is if you think about it, the job's done. People didn't want to vilify Wenger for Wenger. They wanted to not vilify him, but skit him out of Arsenal as a manager, and that had happened. So I couldn't see it. Well, any reason why anyone. I mean, you might have a few hotheads, but I couldn't see why anybody would turn against him on that day, because you say it's a celebration of what he's done before that. In the first part of his career, basically at the club, when he was excellent. So I never thought anybody would do anything stupid.
And were you there on that day when the club awarded him our Invincible trophy? No. Andy, were you there?
I wasn't either.
No. Okay.
As
Myself
far as
and
I'm aware that he hasn't got that. I think he's given the trophy back to the club. Yeah.
He's donated it back. Yeah.
Yeah,
The club gave it to him and he donated it back. I must admit, of the whole things that it done, I thought the farewell was really good, and it genuinely brought a tear to my eye to see the man go. It was a very emotional day. But when I did see him get awarded that trophy, because not long beforehand, Alex Ferguson, his nemesis, had had a heart attack, and they had made an award to Wenger in recognition, and he started off in the opening comments. Fergie had been ill, and he wished him well, which I thought was very honourable and gentlemanlike of him. But when they gave him that trophy, I just thought, hang on, that belongs to the club, not just him. And I thought that was almost a little bit wrong of Arsenal to award this trophy to him. It maybe say we gave him a replica, to acknowledge him, but I just thought it was poor. Trev, what was your thoughts on that day? Because you were there. We were all there together.
Yeah. I'm of a bit of a different view, Fergus, and I think they'd probably arranged that it was never going to leave the club, that gold trophy, even they wanted to make the point that it was Arsene Wenger that had led the side that won it. That's the point they were making, I believe. But it's an interesting story. You mentioned how Wenger graciously mentioned it was the first thing he said when he came on the field after the game in the Emirates.
It was.
He wished Ferguson well. But a few weeks before, we'd played Manchester United away in the league, and we got beat 2-1. Mavropanos made his debut and had an absolute blinder. We got beat 2-1, but I thought we'd found a superstar in Mavropanos that day because we were all worried about him playing. But what the key point is that before the game, these two managers that hate wouldn't be too strong a word, you got the impression that they absolutely hated each other before this day. They came out and Ferguson came to the side of the pitch and he motioned to Wenger to come onto the field at Old Trafford, and Wenger said, no. Anyway, in the end, Ferguson had a mic, I believe, if I remember rightly, and Wenger did come on the field and they shook hands, and Ferguson gave Wenger a little trophy, a little memento of their rivalry, I suppose, in the top flight of English football, which just showed that although they were two men that had been nasty to each other at times, at the end of the day, they were decent men. And then, of course, by the time it came to the game against Burnley at the Emirates, Ferguson had unfortunately been taken quite seriously poorly. And the first thing that Wenger did was say that I'd like to wish my friend Ferguson, didn't say Alex, he said my friend Ferguson well. So great respect shown by each of them towards each other. But no, as for the Premiership trophy, I didn't think it was wrong, mate, to be honest. I didn't think it'd ever leave our ground, and good luck to him.
I agreed. I knew that, known Wenger, known his love for the club and everything else, and the moment he said, I've watched it back 2 or 3 times now, as I said it now, thinking it now, I will miss you. At that moment, I think you could hear just a general all across the stadium. The stadium was full of huge Wenger fans, I expect. So there won't be many people who didn't like him. They would have walked out by then. But
Fergus, it's a fair point to make, mate. You've made a very fair point there. I know several people that, out of respect to Wenger, didn't make a noise in the ground, but they did leave before he came on to have his presentation. So you make a fair and valid point, mate. There were people that left,
Yeah. Guys, we've really overstayed our welcome. We've taken your time today. But listen, we've covered 22 years. And a really, in 22 years, which are so highly successful in some times, but also highly catalogued and remembered because of the way the world is now. So there's so much information. Plus, the one thing that you both said before we even recorded this, when we talked offline about it, it's very much about opinions and experiences. So it's not necessarily about historical fact. So if we've said stuff that people are listening to that they disagree with, by all means, get in touch with us and say it on Twitter. But this is what we're thinking of today. It's not like what the guys have done before, and they've gone through reams and reams of newspaper cuttings and internet stuff. So it's a different concept, and I know the guys were not nervous, but are reticent, but asked, would it be appropriate to do this as a history sort of podcast? But I've enjoyed it. And Mark, Andy, I thank you for your time. Mark, you can stick your hat back on again, just for Wenger.
That's all right, mate. Have some of that.
Enough is enough. Andy, thank you as always for joining us. Tell everybody where they can find the pair of you.
Okay, so we've got the arsenalhistory.com is our main website. We've also got another website, the arsenalcollection.org.uk, which is full of programs, books, handbooks, all sorts of stuff related to Arsenal, where you can read whole programs and books free of charge. And you can also catch us on Twitter at Guna_AK.
And Royal Arsenal MRA.
That's MRA, not MRSA.
You've lost me there, Fergus. You've lost
MRSA. It's like somebody. Don't worry. It's a thing you get in the hospital, isn't it?
Oh, right. Okay.
Look, move on.
You see the tumbrils going through.
Yeah. I just got knocked over by one. There is a question that we put out there. The question, Andy, do you want to repeat the question? What was it? In which season?
In which season did Arsenal first wear a red currant shirt as their home first team kit?
The red currant being the colour that Trevor is wearing now. The only clue I'll give you is I got it wrong. I said 1913. If you want to answer that, it's at Guns and Yellow Ribbons. You can copy the lads in if you like. And there is a book which Andy's got to hold up, which you can win, which is Arsenal, the Complete Record. It's Trev's Bible. People, thank you very much, people. And Mark's holding one up as well.
It's an astonishingly good prize, Fergus, before you close. It's an amazing prize. And I showed it earlier. I'll show it again. I use it all the time. These boys, and we're coming to the end, Fergus. You can close in a second, mate, but Andy and Mark, you've made, and this is the last one, and I'm actually gutted because we'll have to think of something else to talk about and do some more of these, Fergus, because talking to these two lads, being pulled up by these two lads, being corrected by these two lads, but most of all, just generally having a chat about our great football club of these two lads. It's been not only a pleasure, it's been an honour. And if people want to know anything, look at these boys' websites. Enter the competition, win the book because there's none better. And I've got nothing else to say apart from thanks again, boys. Thank you very much. And thank you, Fergus, for letting me be part of this because I have appreciated it very much.
No, thank you.
And I'll echo that. I wasn't looking forward to do anything over the summer after the pandemic and lockdown football and no fans and everything else. I said to Trev, that's it, I'm done for 2 to 3 months. And he went, no, I've got to talk about my Arsenal. And I was talking to my daughter when she was staying with us for a little while, and she said, why don't you do something different? And then Trevor messaged me and said, I've reached out to Andy and Mark from the Arsenal history. I said, they'd be all right having a chat. What we should do? I said, it's quite a coincidence that my daughter has suggested do something different as well. And it's been brilliant. There's been no talk about transfers, no talk about nothing else. It's all just been about the Arsenal. And it's been really, really a joy, one, to meet the pair of you and get to know you because where you first came on about a minute or two before we started, I think Mark was on about 25 minutes, a half hour beforehand, and we're having a good old giggle. And we've learned to get on together, and I can't wait to meet up with you and have a pint. So, it will be really, really good. Thank you both very, very much. Listen, if you like what we do, we are on gunsandyellowribbons.com. We are on Guns and Ribbons on Twitter, Guns and Yellow Ribbons on Facebook and Instagram. Not that we use that much. But if you like what we do on YouTube, it's the same thing. Subscribe. Tell your mates about it. I know we got lots of people picking up on the other one. This one has gone on longer, but it always would have. Boys, thanks very much. Have a good evening, and sorry for keeping you so long.
You've been listening to Guns and Yellow Ribbons, an Arsenal podcast by Arsenal fans for Arsenal fans. Follow us on Facebook at Guns and Yellow Ribbons and Twitter at Guns and Ribbons. And remember to rate and review us too.